talking about using Scrum and then applying some different concepts and practices from Kanban to make it even better. And the purpose would be to increase efficiency, right? And I added the why slide. Really, Kanban comes from lean, as you know, and a big part of it is we want to increase productivity, not by overburdening people and asking them to work a whole bunch of ridiculously long hours. We find and eliminate waste. And that just means you're spending time, or work is spending time doing something that is not necessary and is not adding value. So adding a few little bits and pieces from Kanban can help make your Scrum system more efficient. By the way, I'm pretty open in these conversations. If you have any questions, please interrupt me. If you can put something in chat, I'll try to monitor that as well. So just a teeny bit more about myself. So I'm not going to read all this to you, but I've been working in Agile for probably 15 years. I started many decades ago in IT using Waterfall, and then eventually was introduced to Scrum. And at first I didn't like it because it was different. It was a change. We were all mad, the team was. But after about 6 months, we realized how much better it was. A big part was the transparency, where it wasn't just an opinion. We could look at all the data that we had in our tools, and we could see exactly where we're at as far as our progress towards a goal. And then breaking that work down into smaller chunks, we were getting that faster feedback. It was revolutionary. So just high level, Scrum and Kanban are not that much different. There's just a few things that differentiate the two. So as you know, I'm assuming everybody here is familiar with Scrum. Is that true? Yeah, Scrum is, at least last report, is the most commonly used team framework. So Kanban has a little bit of a market share, but it's not as widely used in software development, but it's starting to change. So in our Scrum, as you know, we have time boxes or sprints, where that's a set number of weeks, anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks, where we focus and we just do work within that time frame. In Kanban, there's not iterations, there's not sprints. It's a continuous flow of value. And then in Scrum, most teams use story points or some type of sizing. If you're kind of a waterfall team, some people use estimates for hours. How many hours will it take? You can still do that in Kanban. Kanban is not rigid at all. It's very flexible. You kind of make sure that you use it to best fit your team and the work that you do. So typically you don't size individual work items unless you want to. And I'll talk a little bit about how that works. When people hear that, they freak out, say, well, how will we know how much work to bring in? How will we know how big something is versus another thing? So we'll kind of talk about a few techniques to do that. And then capacity allocation, basically, how much work should we pull in a sprint, right? We use our average velocity based on our story points typically. So if our team averages 30 story points, I wouldn't want to pull any more than 30 points worth of work into a sprint. Kanban has the same construct, right? To focus and narrow down what we're going to be doing in a time period using work in progress limits. And all that means it's a fixed number. We say, okay, at any given time, we're going to have X number of items in progress. And then once we get to that point, oh, maybe it's 10. And then we don't add any more work in until something goes out. So keeping that even flow of value going really helps you get more stuff done, honestly. And then the big question, and I could do a whole thing on forecasting, but typically our Scrum teams, when someone's asking, well, when is the release going to be done? When is a certain work item? We look at those sprint time boxes and we know, oh, they can get about 30 points of work done in a sprint. We've got a backlog of 100 points, so we can calculate about how long it will take to get that backlog finished. In Kanban, since we don't have sprints, it's essentially looking at historical data, very similar to Scrum, and realizing this in reality, if I look at my metrics using cycle time, meaning how long it takes to get all the work items done, then I can calculate about how long it will take. So just sort of, if you're a Scrum purist, I respect you. I've been in this industry so long that to me, I'm like, let's just use the tool that works best. So if you've read the Scrum guide, it exists in its entirety, right? It's immutable. I say if you don't use all these different constructs and methods in, I almost said safe, in Scrum, then you're not doing Scrum. But it's never meant to be, that's it. It's also a container for other methodologies. Kanban is great on its own. It's also fantastic as an add-on. Whether you're doing Safe or Scrum or whatever, you can pull little pieces in to make it more efficient. So high level, this are the things I'm going to talk about, some Kanban add-ins. We're going to talk about limiting WIP within your sprints, and then handling defects a little bit differently from a Kanban perspective. And then potentially simplify sizing. So it depends on the team. If your team is just taking so much time and effort trying to come up with a size, is it a 3 or a 5? There might be some options you could pose to the team to see if we can make that more efficient and decrease that waste of time. And then a concept of focusing on the work as opposed to the workers. And then we'll talk a little bit about cumulative flow diagram. So in Kanban, we want an even flow of work going through your system, right? Without big bottlenecks where everything gets stopped. And so looking at some of these metrics, you can kind of see where those bottlenecks are and where you might want to adjust some of your fit. And then we'll talk, like I said, the run chart or the throughput chart and cycle time at the end of this presentation. And then the last thing, evolve. So when I first started Scrum, I learned all the rules, we applied it, and then we figured, okay, we're doing everything it says, so check. We don't need to revisit our processes really. And you did that for years. Same concept in Kanban. Some people think, well, I have my Kanban board, I set all it up, I'm good. The idea is we're continually looking at our metrics, talking with our people and our customers, and then modifying that process iteratively and incrementally. Just like we develop software, I feel like the process should also be that small little changes to make improvement continuously. Any questions so far? All right, so Kanban. So Scrum, when teams do Scrum well, a lot of these problems don't happen. But for new teams, they can. So number one, some Kanban constructs to avoid added costs for juggling multiple things back and forth, the cost of context switching. And then you've probably heard the waterfallish sprints, right? And different things you can add to mitigate those waterfall sprints where everything's done, then everything goes to the next phase and the next phase, and you don't realize any actual value until the end of the sprint. And then mitigating the cost of delaying defects, fixing defects within a sprint that are found by the team. So task switching or context switching, whatever you want to call it, this is a real thief of productivity that a lot of times we don't realize it. If I'm working on something and then I quickly jump over to something else and then back to something else, then I get a phone call. human brains are not equipped to handle that. There will be a delay. So in this little picture here, our developer friend has all these constructs in his brain. As soon as he switches to something else, all that stuff goes away. And then it's going to take him a significant amount of time to get back into the zone, if you will. And tons of studies have been done on this, that if you're constantly shifting back and forth, if you've got 20 things on your list of to-do and you're bouncing around, you'll get less done because of that cost, that overhead cost of having to switch your brain into those different concepts, up to 40%. So just by working on one thing at a time, you can increase productivity because you won't have that thief of time associated with cost task switching. So what I like to do, for me, it's so hard when I have all these things. I feel like I need to do a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this, and it feels like I'm being more productive. So I have to have my own WIP limits on the work that I have in my personal Kanban board. It forces me to finish what I have started and then pick up the next thing. It's a lot faster. So per person WIP limits. Now, depending on your tool, if you're using Jira, there's not a way to do this in Jira. It could just be one of your policies or team agreements. All right, for every sprint that we do, each person will have maybe 2 items in progress only at the highest at any given time. You could make it a little bigger, but I see in a lot of Scrum teams on day 1 of sprint planning, each person gets all their stuff, all their user stories, and then I might have 7 different tasks, all simultaneously. I'm switching back and forth. So having that WIP limit is fantastic. Also, if I have that agreement with the team, I'm not going to have one person always overburdened with a ton of stuff, right? Well, we're still waiting on Bob because he's got a list of 20 items. If we can see that, then we're going to be more cohesive as a team. So this will also prevent that cost of context switching. All right, so this is a little simulation of a waterfallish sprint, and I've probably seen this before. So let's suppose here's all the stories you're going to work on in this sprint. It's in your backlog. So day 1, all right, let's move everything into development or whatever your first column is, okay? And so it sits there because they're working on all these different things at the same time, right? Maybe half the sprint goes by and I still don't even have anything in QA because they're trying to finish all these to move it to the next phase. And then maybe on day 5, okay, cool, we did finish 2. We moved that to our testing column. And as I'm going along, yes, they're progressing, but notice I still don't have anything done that I can show my product owner and get approval. As I go down here, I get to day 10, there's always that risk that you won't finish everything, right? Which happens sometimes, and that's okay. But on the flip side, getting that faster feedback with those smaller stories, get it done. And then whatever happens in the sprint, you at least say on day 3, get at least one thing done, potentially shippable. So I want to show you, if you ever pull up your charts for your sprints, one of the classic charts that I always use for Scrum is the burn down, right? Assuming you've all used this before. And if you look at your burn down, it's an interesting thing. And you see this trend here where I've got the number of items, or it could be story points at the beginning. And then it doesn't really change, right? It starts to decrease a little bit halfway through. And then I get to the end and I still have remaining work. So that's really not ideal. I would like to see that. If you've seen the ideal slope, it's really just consistently burning down, very even flow of value. So if you're familiar with the cumulative flow diagram, this is just an example of what this data would look like So I can see in the cumulative flow diagram how much work is in each one of those steps, right? So I have my dev column, my test, and then done. So looking here, I see, oh, wow, there were over 10 items sitting in that dev column for a long, long time until it finally starts to shrink, finally get some into QA. And then here's everything that was completed. Really misaligned there, right? Or I'm not seeing nice, even stripes. And then our throughput chart. Throughput is, or run chart in Jira, it's called a control chart. It just shows you how many things were finished in a given time frame. So again, just another view of this same problem where nothing is done, a couple things are done, very sporadic and hard to predict. So just like our personal WIP limits, they help ensure predictability, right? Because we know how many items a person can take on. We know about how long each one will take on average. Also, the most popular way to introduce WIP limits or work in progress limits are adding a per column limit, right? So this is an example from Azure DevOps. In Jira, you can do the same thing. So a lot of people doing Scrum, they don't use these constructs because they figure, hey, we already know we have our velocity and we're not going to overburden the team because we're just going to take in those 30 points. But what can happen is you can get these bottlenecks of work. And so having a WIP limit, for example, let's suppose instead of starting everything at once and dragging them into develop stage, I have the first column, it's to do. I got my 7 user stories we want to accomplish for that sprint or whatever. And then I take one at a time, right? And maybe if I have 3 developers, I take 3 at a time. And then once that queue is filled up, I'm not going to pull any more work items in. If I pull them all in, I'm going to be task switching. It's going to take longer and I won't see anything done till the end of the sprint. So this helps balance the flow of work through your steps. And then here, it really depends. People always ask me, Sharath, maybe they do, what's the formula? How do I know what WIP? Do you get that question all the time? All the time.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, all the time we get this question, but there's no magic number, right? And
there isn't. There's no magic number, but I like to start. This is what I recommend this as a baseline, maybe 1.5 per person with that skill set, maybe 2, and then adjust and make changes. Hey, if I have a bunch of people idle, maybe I need to increase those WIP limits. Or if they're overburdened, decrease them. And looking at those metrics and charts to see if you're making more efficient use of your time and then increasing your throughput, meaning the number of things you get completed in a given time period.
If I could add one point, I would say most of you would not get this right for the first time. We did not get it right for the first time. Right. So you have to, like Jill mentioned, you have to adjust it according to what kind of results you're seeing. Only then you could, probably move forward with it. It's not like we told you this and it's going to be this. It's not going to work out.
I'll never change.
Not because
what I like to do, that's a great point. I thank you, Sharath. I like to, people tend to be really resistant in my experience to putting WIP limits on. So I like to, if it's a team who wants to start using a little bit of Kanban, I look at the CFD, for example, and you can see, oh, once I see that picture, hello, there's so much stuff here in that first column, we can't get as much stuff completed. How about, once you see that, how about we just try minimizing how many items we have in dev at any given time? Let's just try it, right? And then seeing how the work will actually flow faster. Once you see that and you see the proof, it's like, oh, she's right. Metrics, baby. Okay, so one of the models, I love this, Sharath, from Kanban University, stop starting and start finishing. right? So it's so tempting. Humans are weird. Like, I want to start more because it feels like you're getting more done. But what we want to shift the mindset to our Scrum teams is let's focus on what items are done before we pull anything else. Get it to done, right? Don't start anything else till it's done. Otherwise, you're not going to make your sprint goals. All right, so here, potentially, if I added some WIP limits to my board, here would be a better picture of those charts. Still doing Scrum, still fulfilling all the Scrum laws or whatever, but now I see this nice flow or it's descending in a consistent pattern. Looking here at the cumulative flow diagram, I can see this is a lot more balanced here. It's not as big a wedge as it was before. So I'm actually getting things to QA faster and getting them done faster. And then my throughput, I can actually have something I can get accepted from the product owner, or maybe if you're going to deploy on demand, you have something you can deploy within that sprint, not just at the end.
Yeah.
Oops. All right. Any questions?
Jill, I think maybe emphasizing on the CFD for a second, and what the how is it different? Because I don't think everyone understands to read that. So if you could maybe put.
Yes. So I have another slide for that. I
Thank
switched
you.
these around a little bit. So like, what's that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because
Thank you.
not a lot of people understand those charts and they don't care sometimes.
I know it's so confusing. Like I could spend like 2 hours explaining it. I didn't understand it all for years. I pretended I did. I'm not kidding. I finally had to like sit down with a piece of graph paper and then do this. And then I'm like, oh, I get it. So yeah, a lot of people don't love it, but it's a pretty powerful tool. But there are other ways to pull similar metrics without using this chart. And I'll talk about it in just a few minutes in more detail if you're curious.
Thank you.
All right, so defects. This is in sprint defects, not production defects, right? This would be, I'm coding something, and then maybe you have a separate QA person, then that person logs a defect on it. So in my experience, and this isn't always the case, obviously, in classic Scrum, once a story is developed, it might move to QA. Say I find a defect, I log the defect, and then that just either sits there, right, waiting, and then typically it's the Scrum teams aren't focused on fixing that. They're more interested in finishing that stuff they had drug in, the new user stories, right? And if there's time, we'll go and we'll fix that defect. Or it's crazy things like, oh, let's just remove the defect and put it in our backlog and we'll fix it later. So the problem with that is, one, the longer you wait to fix a defect, it exponentially takes longer and longer and longer, right? Because of the context switching for one. If I'm right here and I'm working on it, my QA person finds a defect, I fix it right then, it will take me less time to do that. And the concept of just, I love this thought. So what you've done, say you have your process, step, step, step. Step 3, whatever you've done to that piece of functionality, you've invested the most time and money, right? That's inventory. You should prioritize that stuff towards the end and get it done, right? You can't get any valuable feedback or value until it's done. So what we're going to do is focus on finishing that stuff that is the oldest, if you will, and then move in something new. So here's how I like to do it. If I inject a little Kanban in there, when I find a defect, right, it's obvious, I put it on the ticket. And then before my dev picks up another new user story in the sprint, someone says, oh, okay, I'm going to fix that defect, pa-ching, get that done, and then move in the next one. There's a little picture. People are like, how did that even work? This is, and there's different ways. And Sharon, I love if you have another idea. You could here say, leave it in that same column. I flag it as a bug, and that's our policy. right? Maybe the developer's in a different column, but they say, oh, I'll pick up that first, then move in the next one. All right, so Scrum events. Scrum events used to be called ceremonies. A couple things you can do that I really like to make them more efficient, in my opinion, and more valuable. So our daily Scrum or daily stand-up. So what typically happens in a daily stand-up in Scrum? How does it run? Sharath, help me out, buddy.
Well, everyone has to give a status to Scrum Master.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, it's for us to gather together to understand how we are progressing to achieve our sprint goal per se. So yeah, but it is tend to be taken the other way. The first answer that I was giving you, but yeah, it's us gathering to understand the progress to achieve the sprint goal.
Yes, and that's the intent behind it. But a lot of people don't do it that way, where each individual, they really focus on the people, and they say, okay, Jill, your turn. And I say, here's what I did yesterday. Here's what I'm going to do today. Here's my impediments, which is fine, but it's really focused on the people. So I don't know about you, but when I'm in those type of stand-ups as a team member, I'm not listening to what anybody says, because I'm looking at my stuff like, oh, I didn't finish anything. So I'm kind of, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? So we're not actually collaborating towards that sprint goal. In Kanban, they also suggest you have a daily Kanban meeting. And rather than focusing on each individual and making sure they did their job, it's all in your Jira, or it's in your tool. It's all there. We don't need to have a status report every day. So if I'm the Scrum Master, I pull up my Scrum board, right? And we talk about the work in progress, right? We're focused on the work. Start here on the right-hand side. Okay, this has been here for 5 days. What can we do to get this done? And then the idea is, just like in Scrum, the team members step up and they collaborate. Maybe they swarm, maybe they do pair programming, maybe they help in QA or vice versa. And then I'm seeing that faster flow of value. And then the old retrospective, right? Retrospectives are fantastic. In Scrum, right, at the end of every sprint, you take a moment, an hour, whatever, and then you reflect on the previous sprint and find different ways to improve your process, essentially. So a couple thoughts from Kanban. In Kanban, we have a retrospective. You don't have to have it every 2 weeks. Like I said, Kanban's very flexible. I recommend have it at least once a month. Otherwise, if you wait too long, right, sure, then you're probably not going to get a lot of value out of it. Okay. But in Kanban, again, just like in our daily stand-up, we're focused on the work. So one idea, when you're in your retrospectives, look at the done user stories, pull them up, right, in your tool. Like, okay, here's the stuff that we completed. And now I have context. Maybe I see one that took longer than we thought. Oh, what happened? Is there something we can change and do different next sprint to make that more effective? So giving that picture and then focusing on the work is helpful. And obviously other things should come up in that meeting, like, well, it's because Bob keeps bugging me and you need to handle those. It might not be captured in Jira. Can you imagine? You put a ticket in, Bob bugged me today. Story points 5. And then this, in fact, Shrev, came up, actually it was years ago. It's a person in one of my Kanban classes, and he does Kanban. And they first started with regular retros, where what went well, what went wrong, and that stuff, which is a great way to start. He said what he did, actually added a swim lane, a row in their Kanban board or their Scrum board. And as the teams were working, if they thought of something, an opportunity for improvement, or a problem that they wanted to discuss in the retro, they just add a little card for it. Ding, ding. So it's already there. So rather than, oh, I can't remember, that was 2 weeks ago, but it's all there. You basically have a backlog of potential things to discuss in a retrospective. All right, this is controversial, Sharath. I'm going to need your your
Mhm.
opinion. So, like I said, if you're using the Fibonacci sequence to estimate stories and you love it, awesome, right? Just a couple of thoughts. So I get this question a lot. Some people like it because it really does shed a light on how big this is. Do I need to carve it and break it down? That discussion, I think, is probably the best part of it. You could just narrow down the number of numbers you can use. It'll make it faster. Like if I've got, I don't know, 10 different numbers I have to choose from, it's going to take me longer. I'm going to be thinking about, okay, what tasks would I have to do? And that's kind of misses the intent of story sizing versus sizing by number of hours we expect to do it. So you could just use 1, 2, and 3, or small, medium, large. Or, like I mentioned earlier, you could not size at all, and you just say, we're going to take X number of tickets or user stories in a sprint at any given time. And I've noticed, and it's not everywhere, if you've been doing Scrum for a while and say your velocity is 30, look back at your history, and I'll bet you in most cases, there's about the same number of user stories in each sprint, right? So if there's a way you can make things a little easier and faster, you can become more efficient. So the question is, before you bring something in Kanban, you say, well, you still have time expectations. Can we pull this in and get it done in 5 days? No. Okay, it's too big. We need to slice it down. So a lot of similar conversations and decisions happen, whether you're doing Kanban or Scrum or a combination of both. All right, let's look at just a couple metrics and way you can set up your tool in order to pull these additional data aspects. So first of all, when you're setting up your Scrum board, right? It's called a Scrum board. It's basically a Kanban board. Having pretty clearly defined columns will really help you find where your bottlenecks are, where you might need to adjust your WIP limits. I pull up a lot of different teams, and it's just to do, doing, done, right? But then I can't tell what's really happening. Instead, think about some meaningful columns, some column names with the associated statuses. So then I can pull up data that says, oh, it looks like maybe this is a dev done where it's waiting. It looks like work is just sitting waiting in dev done for half the sprint. Oh, that's a bottleneck. That's a source of waste that you can then mitigate. So start there, setting up your boards so you can pull the right data. So next is cycle time. So we know in Scrum, if you have 2-week sprints, nothing should take more than 2 weeks to complete, right? But you could also focus a little closer and say, well, okay, during that last sprint, I'm curious. This is just telling you how long it took from when the team started to when they marked it as done. And say, well, this took, less than a day. Oh, this one took like half the sprint or more. How come? Maybe there was just some unexpected things. Maybe it was scope creep, right? Maybe it was just too big, which is a great lesson to learn for the team for next time, thinking about carving those down. Oops. And this is a great one too. So if you're doing your stand-ups, they call it aging. So this is just showing me, it's a replication of columns in my Jira board. And then it says, this isn't live. If I hover over the dots, it tells me how long that ticket has been sitting in that particular column. And in the stand-up, like we talked about, oh, you know what? This has been here a long time. What can we do to get it to the next stage? So very effective way to really focus on the work and then figuring out the whole goal of, I guess, any software development group is to do things faster, deliver faster, you get feedback faster, and you can capture revenue faster. And then throughput, or it's just basically people like, how do I know if I have just a Kanban team, how do I know how much work they can get done in a week or in a month? So same difference. In this is a throughput chart. This is a gadget I have in Jira. It's just showing me I set it to for every week. I want to look at this Kanban team and say, okay, Kanban team, how many items, how many number of tickets did you complete this week? And I can see the trend. Looks like they complete about 5 items a week. Now I can talk to the product owner and she can make plans for forecasting. Well, looks like roughly about 5. If you've got 7 user stories to complete the feature, it'll probably take a couple of weeks. I mean, you could also do the same thing with story points, right? Rather than number of items. All right, Sharath, this is what you've been waiting for. All right, cumulative flow diagram. I should just bring up my JIRA. What is this all about? So take one of Sharath's class, right? You go into detail on this. So it's such a confusing chart, but what it's showing you is trends over time. So let me walk you through it. So let's suppose you have your Scrum board, right? You've got to do, development, QA, whatever. So, and then done is the last one. So this bottom little chunk shows you all of the work items for each day that were done, right? This is cumulative. This is what confused me, Sharath. Just the done stuff is cumulative, right? So if I look over to the end, it says, hey, from here to here, they deployed, 10 different items. Now, what's interesting is looking above, I see, okay, so think about your Scrum board. It's going from the bottom, it's the right-hand side. The next one was, let's see, then testing. I have a tiny sliver here, not a lot of work in testing. See how small that is? And then in progress, and I can kind of see the wider the band, that means there's more work in that column. Could be a bottleneck, right? I'm seeing this peach color, that ready for development, right? Maybe we could balance our WIP limits in order to increase the flow of value, get it to test faster and get it done faster. And then, oh, this is weird. This is a team, I just pulled this up today. Looking at the work they're pulling in, look at this, how this grew. For some reason, they had a pretty good even flow, but I can see here, wow, for some reason, they just dumped a whole bunch of stuff in that first column in their analysis. And good luck getting that all done, right? So that's basically how it works. There's a lot more details and a lot more information you gather. But that's what I have to say about it. Sharath, what do you think? Do you use this report much?
I think it's a lot bigger subject than this. And we
It is, I know.
We have lots of questions, but we would discuss this in detail in the trainings that we do. But we can probably, we will be open for questions if anyone has, and then we can help it out. So I would just look at one thing. If you look at this metric and the chat, I would want all of those bands to be in parallel. If all of them has, the similar distance, the height, what I say, and then all of them are consistently in similar size, which means the work is happening in a similar fashion, right? And then like Jill mentioned, analysis, if you see the band, height of the band went too high, which means there is too much work in progress in that area, which is not good, right? So again, which is good or bad is the secondary thing that we'll have to go and inspect, but then there is something to inspect there, right? Could be something good. Maybe they hired 10 different analysts there to do the work, right? But again, it's a point which says that there is something going differently and we have to inspect here, right? So yeah, there are many types of cumulative flow diagrams that we can look at. And then every time it surprises us with the different kind of answers that teams give us on what's happening in their teams. So I will leave it there and not going to go deep in there more, but if we have questions, we can take on that.
That's a great point. Whenever I talk about metrics, I usually start with use metrics for good. They're fantastic, but you can't just draw assumptions. Oh, it's because they're lazy, right? It's a great opportunity to talk to the team. Like Sharath said, maybe who knows what happened. And yeah, don't make assumptions, and make sure senior managements don't make those assumptions either and use it for evil. All All right. So in conclusion, everybody, a quick story. And you're like, why is there a chocolate chip cookie there? So the concept of continuous collaborative improvement when it comes to your processes. So a few years ago, I got on this kick to find the perfect chocolate chip cookie recipe. I tried so many different things, literally for years, different recipes, different techniques, and so forth. And, I would get to one, like, okay, this is pretty good, but I really wanted to find the one so I could stop getting better. And then it finally dawned on me, this was like, I don't know, a year ago, it's never going to be done. There's always a better way. There's always another way. There's another idea. And that's okay, right? That's okay. Same with your process. Same with your Scrum, your Kanban, your SAFe, whatever kind of technique that you're using to manage work. So on that note, a recap. So we want to visualize your sprint work. Most people probably do this. You have an option in most tools to actually show the flow, not just the work, but the workflow. So if you're just seeing it in a list, be sure you use that option to do a Scrum board. And then this is like a personal challenge. Stop switching tasks. Just try it for a couple hours and see how much more productive you can be. And then think about limiting per person WIP. How many items that Jill has on her list at any given time. And then think about adding WIP limits in your Scrum boards to each column, if it makes sense. And then really prioritize those defects before I pull in new work. And then eliminate waste. Like, that's so fun if the team is invested. It's fun. Like, oh, now we switch this one little thing and now we're delivering 20% more items in a sprint. It's so cool rather than having someone drive them to be more productive. And then see if you have those bottlenecks. If I have a certain column, a lot of times it's QA because they usually don't have as many people there. If you can get numbers to that and you can try a bunch of different things in order to narrow down how long things take to QA, maybe automation, for example. But once you go through all those steps, and maybe you have a case that, you know what, we need another tester, right? Here's all the stuff we've done. We've made this improvement. But if you want us to go faster, now you have to spend some money to hire somebody new. And then just have more fun. I'm all about fun. Just have more fun. Life is short. And so on and so on. And we keep improving until we die. Right, Sharath?
And don't look for the perfect cookie recipe.
Oh, yes. I want chocolate chip cookies. They're like my favorite thing ever. They're so good.
The way you put it, I like it.
Excellent. Yes, I'll send you the recipe. What questions does anybody have? Thoughts, ideas? Would you like to share with us?
Okay, so we are open for questions if you have any, guys. Thank you, Jill, for your awesome presentation and the knowledge.
Pleasure.
Okay, guys. So we're here for next 10 minutes. I see a hand. That's Mallikarjuna. You wanna go ahead and mute and then ask the question, please?
Yep. Thank you, Sharath. Yeah, thank you, Jill, for explaining about these Scrum plus Kanban reports. Can you please go back to the cumulative flow diagram once?
Yes. Oop.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see that the analysis time is more here towards the end of the dates like a 12/12/23. So, and at the same time, the resolved items also very good in terms of the numbers. So what could be the ideal scenario, what it indicates, and what could be the ideal scenario of a good flow efficiency of team deliverables?
So I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part.
So his question was, what would be an ideal graph look like?
Okay, ideal. Like Sharath said, I would have pretty even bands. So each one, and maybe, like you said, maybe you have more developers, so there's more work in progress. And that's okay, unless it's getting big, or I have too much in one, or it's shrinking. So I'm looking for variations within an individual band, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And then, yes, so this is a variation, right? We start at pretty consistent, and then bam, this changed. I look down here, and maybe you have a certain step where they're not getting enough work. right? Because there's a bottleneck. If I see nothing in QA for half the sprint, something's going on. That's a waste. See if we can get things moving through your system. Did that answer your question, Makajara?
Yes, Jill.
Great question.
Right. And this is not the end of the workday, or it's not like a sprint where you say, hey, this is the last day. This could be the first day of an cadence that you're considering, or this could be a last day of the cadence, right, Malik? So
Yes.
you can't assume that this is the last day.
Hmm.
So no, this is how it is. No, this could be the first day of another thing that you're
Continuous flow.
right? The continuous flow. That's what we said. There is no iterations or sprints here. So this could be start of something different happening in your team that happened after 12/7, correct? So, and later on, the graph would be totally different than what you're looking at the left. And why we emphasize on that, the consistent parallel bands. The parallel bands means everything is going in flow, in same manner, same fashion. Okay. Hope that.
Also, I just remembered, if you're doing iterations, you're going to see steps, right? Which is not a bad thing, right? Because you start all this stuff and you finish it and you close it out. So you'll still have the bands, but you'll see these steps with each sprint planning. That's typical.
And then we have Srinivas. Malik, is that answer?
Oh,
Yes, I got it, Sharad. Thank you, Sharad, Jill. Yeah.
Okay, Srini, yeah.
Yeah, hi Jill. Thank you for the presentation. It is awesome. And thank you for the opportunity. So on the same diagram, I just want to exchange my views. Please correct me if I am wrong. So it's not a recommendation or a guideline from the Agile, but as I see the diagram here, the major part at the end, should I assume that it is speaking on the Scrum matrix, because there is some leakage, there is some technical debts left over, and the capacity is not being used properly, and it is affecting on the deliverables of the MVA or whatever, something like that. So if you permit, your experience permits, do you recommend to include the Kanban team into the retrospective of the sprint after the 2 weeks, or again for the Scrum, for the Kanban after 4 weeks retrospective involving the Scrum team, so that that peak can be made flat, as Sharad said. This is my view. So can you correct me?
So you're saying to have the retrospective more often so you can see, make changes faster to improve. Is that what you're saying, Srinivas?
So I think he was talking about the observation. Srini, frankly, I did not get a lot of what you said too, because could you maybe sum it in 2 sentences if it's
Sorry, my dog was barking. Sorry.
I'm talking about the mountain part at the last end, So the mountain part, if we want to bring it to the flat, should I assume in order to bring that, the Scrum matrix, like the leakage, the technical debt, and all these things have to be avoided, which can be taken care of during the retrospective of the sprint end of 2 weeks, and the retrospective for the Kanban at the end of 4 weeks, involving both the teams together. I mean, bringing the integration between the Scrum and the Kanban.
Okay. So I think I understand your question. So I just said maybe once a month, but if it makes more sense to have it after every sprint in the Kanban, that's cool too. As long as you have stuff to talk about, right? Some improvements. I mean, honestly, the more often you have those retrospectives, the faster you can make improvements. That is just my recommendation. So it's kind of up to the team. I would try it different ways, have it every 2 weeks. And then they're like, we don't have anything to talk about. It's the same conversation we had 2 weeks ago. All right, let's try it once a month and see how that goes.
Yeah, and then you can use the opportunity to look at this. I think half part of it, yes, you can use the opportunity to look at this and then maybe work on what's going on here, right? On the analysis part, he was stressing on the analysis part of it. So, yeah, I mean, again, Srini, like I mentioned the point, right? The stuff that moved into analysis does not mean for sure that there is a problem. Could be a change, right? There could be a change. Definitely there is a change because you see a lot of work that has moved into analysis. There could be multiple reasons for that.
Yeah,
Again,
maybe they're not using the backlog feature. They just have everything in that one column.
yeah, something could have changed, and then yes, you can utilize that retrospective to talk about it and then change if something is needed.
I just realized when this span goes up, no, this is everything the cumulative done, it kind of flattens out.
Right.
They're getting less done because they have.
Yeah, because my thing is from 12/7 until 12/12. That is where you are seeing the graph going upside. It directly speaks on the performance of the Scrum Master.
I better talk to Varun.
It doesn't speak the performance of the Scrum Master is a wrong statement. I would say again, you're judging a Scrum Master looking at the
It's the Scrum Master's fault.
It is not. I mean, I'm sorry for using that statement, but because the program manager will always feel that there is some leakage or some seepage or some capacity utilization.
First, I'll explain you what that means. The curve means you have pulled at least you have pulled double the number of tickets from to do to analysis. That's why the curve went like that. The meaning of the curve is, if you see in the future of earlier states, 12/4, 11/29, 12/4, it's little flatter. But if you see, it went up as a mountain, which means work from to do to analysis have been pulled a lot. That is what it means. The reason why so much work from to do to analysis has been moved could be a lot of reasons. There could be 5 analysis guys maybe hired, or someone, a CEO has told you a new initiative to analyze. You do not know what's happening in the team. And it could, yes, it is a place for you to inspect and adapt or retro, but it's not a place where you should start, saying that someone has done something wrong. But it's definitely a place where you have to look into what's happening. Jill,
Thank you. So Srinivas, to your point though, if you're a Scrum Master, right, you're with the team every day.
You know it.
Yeah. Right. So, but for us, like, we don't know, we'd have to talk. But maybe the Scrum Master, when he sees that happen, he's like, is this really what we want to do? Here's what's going to mitigate that so it wouldn't continue. I think, yeah, both sides. We won't blame him and yell at him, but it's an opportunity to learn.
Opportunity to learn what's happening. Correct.
Yeah, gotta watch the numbers, Scrum Masters. Yep, perfect. All right, I don't even know what time it is. Anything?
Thank you, Sharat. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
Okay, we are at time then. Thank you so much, Jill.